Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and I'm speaking again with Susan Dugan. And today we thought we'd talk about a couple of different things from A Course in Miracles. One is the idea of the quiet center, which is mentioned briefly in the last paragraph of the section called I Need Do Nothing, which is section 7 in chapter 18 of the text of A Course in Miracles, The Passing of the Dream. And also lesson 109, which is I Rest in God. And they kind of tie together pretty nicely, particularly in terms of just looking at the turmoil in our lives, whether they are literal or figurative storms in our mind. And we just thought it would be a good and timely topic to review in light of current geopolitical and climatological events, I guess you could say, as well as probably many other arenas as well. So anyway, welcome, Susan. It's always a joy to talk with you, and particularly about the course. So any opening news or comments or anything?
No, this topic kind of emerged because we had set up a time to talk, and a few weeks ago. There seemed to be one hurricane after another, just pummeling different areas. And the most recent one, Maria, I guess, that really has decimated Puerto Rico. And so you had suggested that you sent me some quotes and areas in the course where Jesus uses the analogy of storms. The world is continually seems to be continually generating these storms of one kind, literal or figurative storms, and that what we're learning or trying to learn as course students is that we're really not. It certainly seems like we're victims of the world we see, and our experience is often that we are victims in very horrible ways, as we've been witnessing, of the world we see. And he's not asking us to deny that in any way, but to hold some awareness and ask for help in holding some awareness that that the world we see is an outside picture of the inward condition of the belief in separation, and which the ego's strategy of making real and coping with the guilt of that belief was to project it all outward and then experience it constantly as it's some kind of inward incoming attack. And so whether we're experiencing it on the micro level, as we do in our very challenging special relationships, most of us have relationships that they have their ups and downs, but certainly the downs can be very challenging when we're not getting our needs met, or when a loved one is ill, or we're in disagreement with others, and all the different ways that we conflict with others, and so whether it's on that kind of personal level or whether it's on a collective level, we always seem to be finding ourselves amid these storms. And the Course is trying to remind us that there is a quiet, and this section in chapter 18, which is called I Need Do Nothing, concludes with a discussion of the quiet center in the mind. And it's something that Ken Wapnick talked about a lot, and in a way, I think, embodied. He really was someone who was very, very aware of that quiet center, and sort of was able to communicate from that basis and with us, and so it was a living demonstration of what it means to be there. That was very helpful to us. But Jesus is the inner teacher that is always waiting for us in the quiet center of the mind, not the world, but back in the mind, where we, the fragment that we are of the decision-making mind that we've forgotten we are, can retreat to that quiet center with our teacher and make another choice. And that doesn't mean that we don't aren't experiencing or dealing with the world, the incoming storms of the world in whatever guise they seem to be presenting in our lives, which, you know, that we're learning to make our lives a classroom of learning something else about ourselves, and healing our mind. But it does mean that we can remember, we can identify with safety, we can identify with innocence, and that will enable us as we go forward in it, whatever way we're challenged to deal with the very terrible things that may be happening, to come from as kind and loving a place as possible, and to ultimately, you know, experience at least moments, glimpses of the safety that really, you know, really is unshaken, the safety of our true nature, which really is not a body you know, at odds with all these other bodies of some kind or another, whether it's the elements of nature or whether it's, you know, other physical bodies or illness or whatever seems to be happening. So anyway, that's the idea of this topic, I guess, is to sort of try to reassure people and to reassure ourselves, because even witnessing this is very, very upsetting. You know, I mean, it's people, it's a humanitarian crisis what's going on in Puerto Rico, and there's been great suffering from, you know, all of the kinds of things that have been happening to people in these natural disasters, and you know, in the man created disasters that are still you know, always ongoing in this world, and there's new ones arising all the time, and it doesn't matter what side of them you're on, they're upsetting, they're challenging, you know, and we're always trying to align ourselves with a side that we believe is less guilty than the other side to somehow make it feel better. And you know, ultimately it never really does feel better within the dream, but within that quiet center of the mind, peace is still available, peace is unshaken by the storms. So
Yep.
yeah.
Indeed. Very well said, as
Yeah.
usual. Yeah, it does seem that, you know, if we remember to not be, what's the right word? I guess engaged in an identity way with what's going on, either with ourselves or with you know, others in our world, in a way that adds to the misery, and I think that's done. You know, the way that adds to the misery is accomplished, if we will, by forgetting to forgive, or you know, essentially making the dream real in one capacity or another. And it seems like if we can just remember to see the truth of everyone, including ourselves, as being you know, completely innocent, independent, and otherwise not affected by what appears to be happening in the world, that really, you know, does give us the opportunity to let ourselves and everyone off the hook, and frees our mind to you know, to be at the peace that we really truly have and are, eternally. And as we've talked about many times, you know, we don't usually hang out in there
Yeah.
nearly as much as we'd like to, but we can get more and more frequent glimpses of that, and then those glimpses can be extended into longer periods of not just timelessness, but a real and genuine ease, where from that quiet center, as the text section points out, we're able to truly be helpful. And sometimes that'll take the form of behavior, and other times it's just remembering that peace is not only available to everyone, it really is everyone. And that I think is the strength that we're all looking for, and also the kindness that we're asked to contribute in the world. So.
And usually it's, you know, as you were pointing out, it's not where we start. It's not, this is a course in continually trying to pay attention to my reactions, and the willingness, having the willingness to recognize that that I must be wrong. I mean, we have to raise the first step of forgiveness is to raise to doubt the cause of what we think is happening to us,
Exactly.
and or to others, which can be quite upsetting. And so the course is never telling us that we're not, that we've done something wrong when we react. It's inevitable that we will react, because if we're identified as bodies, as everyone who's trying to find their way home secretly is, we're going to react. I mean, our senses scream that this is real and this is a problem, and for bodies it is a problem. And so we're not disidentified with the body yet. That happens at the very end of this journey. But we can question the cause of our reactions, because the underlying cause of all of our reactions, while it appears to be all these forms of assault, is always really in disguise the belief that we attacked God, that we separated from God, that we've kind of turned around and again projected out there so that we could experience the punishment that we think we deserve for that belief. And that keeps it all very real, and it keeps it from ever really getting looked at or solved. And so from the Course's perspective, the answer is really simply to convey our willingness to our inner teacher by at least expressing that my way isn't working, that maybe I'm wrong, and we don't even have to fully believe it. We just have to be able to say, that there's something wrong here. And sometimes when we're really deep in it, I find that I don't even really, it's almost confusing. I really don't know that I have a mind. But I can remember that I must be wrong about the cause. And that's really helpful. And, because our allegiance to this thought system goes so much deeper than we're aware of. And so it's we need help from a teacher that doesn't believe in the thought system, that remember to laugh at the tiny mad idea of separation. And that if we can signal our willingness to learn, that requires only that I recognize that I don't know, that I can be taught. But so it's really, those feelings and those reactions arise, I have to just say, Jesus thinks otherwise. And there's that quote in the Course, God thinks otherwise. And Jesus is still in that quiet center, unshaken by the storm. And I'm shaken by the storm. It feels like I am, but I would like to join him in that quiet center. I would like to see the innocence and safety that really envelops us beyond this. And that's enough to trigger the awareness when we're ready to accept it, those glimpses, those holy instants of where we do rise above it, and we do return to the mind, and we have a experience of something that is not dependent on the world. And the Course tells us that even those little glimpses, those little tastes of a different reality that is never in jeopardy, will begin to grow our very very weak trust and faith over time. And that's why this is a practice, and it's a practice that we have to, we're in school, we have to really practice all the time. We're challenged to practice all the time. And I don't know about you, but it's it certainly seems like within the dream that the challenges come more rapidly all the time too. That they're and that's also part of the the ego fights back, and we're not aware that we're choosing that. We're trying to defend this personal self, and so that's going on at the same time at an unconscious level. And so we can't be further along than we are, but we can be very present. The more present we can be with this, that's where that's where the quiet center is, just in that willingness. And, there's that wonderful, in the workbook, the part 2, the what is forgiveness. There's those what is, definitions. And, there's that quote that forgiveness is still and quietly does nothing. And, it says somewhere in there, it offends no aspect of reality or something like that. But and it tells us that, all we're asked to do is raise to doubt. The unforgiving mind refuses to raise to doubt its belief that it's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that the forgiving mind is the way we become a forgiving mind, or at least is to just doubt, raise to doubt that
maybe I'm wrong, and that could make me happy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, at least it's recognizing that what invited the Course into the world, the scribing of the Course, was Helen and Bill's recognition, Bill's recognition really, that there has to be another way, a better way of relating in this world. That's the recognition that my way isn't working. And although that's what drew us, we all had some recognition of that. That's what drew us to the Course. It's an ongoing recognition that we're asked to come to again and again as we become reactive, as we become. But the forgiveness is still and quietly does nothing. It's not going to fight with something that's not real. It just waits. It's right there. We're the ones that always flee back into the dream away from it. But it never goes anywhere. It feels like it does. It feels like we're abandoned. We're always trying to turn it around again and blame it on God, blame it on Jesus. But Jesus doesn't go anywhere, and he knows that we're afraid, and so he's also not offended by our continual defections back to the dream. He just waits. He knows that the pain of this is going to turn us back toward him, and that ultimately the contrast between those moments that we spend with him, any moment, is worth 1,000 years. As he's always throwing out these 1,000 years. Time doesn't mean a lot to him, but so we are advancing back up the ladder. Separation seemed to lead us down, whether it feels like that or not.
Right. It's inevitable anyway. So
right.
that's also comforting.
The end is sure because it really didn't happen, but we if we can be present with this and just take that first step, I really think that is that's the answer that we have to return to again and again.
Yeah, and it seems like it's perennially just taking the first step until it becomes a consistency, and I don't think we're asked to fully generalize until right at the end. And that's when the Course says God takes the final step. But in the meantime, if we can just remember to forgive ourselves for our lapses, and then continue on with the curriculum of forgiveness when we get ourselves back up on our feet, so to speak. That's all it's asked. I had a personal episode this week of some food poisoning at the beginning of over the weekend, and so my personal storm was gastronomic.
Right.
And during that time, I had maybe a mild fever, but sometimes what I'll notice is during those times in the past, as well as this last week, my thoughts become a bit more jumbled when I have a slight feverish condition, and I was thinking, well, that's actually just a metaphor for what the ego state is all the time, is in a state of turmoil and chaos and a storm, if you will, but the ego's perfect storm, unfortunately, for it, is doomed to failure because it's a dream storm, and what we really are. There is that part of us, and I was noticing even during this last earlier part of the week, there was an awareness that, okay, I'm not this body. And that was actually hugely helpful when the bodily sensations that I have had, in previous years and episodes of things similar to this were such that I realized it's not about um, denying the sensations or the experience or doing the things that my magic culinary or health regimen efforts. None of that in any way is that we're suggested that we not do. It's just a matter of just looking at that and seeing the motivation behind everything with kind eyes, and seeing that it's all part of the process of looking at the contents of the mind, and not taking the chaos and the insanity seriously, not taking the feverish thoughts, if you will, that the ego has, and making those into a bigger deal than they are, which ultimately is nothing.
Right,
So,
right.
and that's where I think the sense of humor really can come in handy. I spent the little time that I was watching TV in the early part of the week. I was watching my favorite comedy shows, and and a Jerry Seinfeld monologue, and I was real. What's
Yeah.
that?
There was a Netflix special, I think, of
Yeah,
his.
yeah, exactly. And I was finding, those are the kind of things that remind me to not take my own dreams so seriously. And I think when I can do that, then I can apply that not in any less compassionate way, but actually in a more compassionate way to people in the Caribbean, or the devastated areas in any part of the world, or my own situation. And
Right,
anyone or anything, I think that becomes the quiet center that we can apply to other things. So
right,
yeah.
exactly. And that's a great example. I mean, anything, any kind of sickness, any kind of, and it is always the identification with the body. I mean, that
Mhm.
the vulnerable condition of our bodies. We're so dependent on everything external for our life. We think that's all there is, and I think that when you, as you had said, when you're in it, whether it's a physical sickness or a psychological sickness, emotional sickness, our thoughts do become very jumbled. We become confused,
Mhm.
and when we're deep in the ego thought system. I had a experience a couple weeks ago of visiting my parents again, and they're um, both where they live and their health state are both really, it's very challenging, and getting there is very challenging. It involves a couple of planes and a ferry and a driver, and it's just not easy to get to, and it's not, and their condition is very, very challenging, and they're really showing signs of dementia, and my mom depression and stuff like that. So really, it's not just physical with them, and being sort of alone with them going through that. It's you do begin to start to be sort of confused. It's almost like it's catching, um, and then your own complicated feelings about them, and the past stuff that inevitably comes up when you're visiting your parents and stuff like that. So I was starting to feel that, wait a minute, like how do I become right-minded again, and but what and so even though it felt very dense, it almost felt like a different dimension or something that I was in, whatever that means. But it felt like another reality. And you're trying to be compassionate, but you're also feeling all these feelings and neediness and whatever might be coming up. Um, but I was able to, as I was saying earlier, remember at least to question the cause.
Mhm. Mhm.
That something else is going on right now, and it's not what I think it is. And that was helpful. That was a lifeline, really, to remembering that, you know um, I remembering that I have a teacher, and remembering that I can look at this differently, even if I'm not able to right now. That I will, and through that process, and we all have things in our lives that seem much more difficult than other things. That's of course called special relationships, and so when we're having challenges in our special relationships, we're going to hang on to those more, and I mean, we're just much more invested in keeping that going, whatever the issues are. And so it's really hard for us to let go of, but that doesn't mean it's impossible, and it doesn't mean that we're
Bingo.
right. And so we can, so it took me longer than it does in other areas of my life
Mm-hmm.
to kind of come to my it's not coming to my senses. It would be the opposite of that, I guess. But to let go of my senses, relying on my senses for telling me what was happening. And but at least again, the practice is that questioning,
Yeah.
of what I'm feeling. I'm wrong about the cause of what I'm feeling. And the truth is that however this is presenting, we are the same. We all share the same need. It may look very different how we're trying to find it, but my parents and my literal siblings and my children and my husband, everyone, my friends, my colleagues, we're all trying to find our way home. And we're all afraid, and we're all terrified by losing our senses, our body, our sense of a personal self. I mean, that's with us all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. And the ego's idea of a body born into a world only to eventually age and die is not a kind idea. It wasn't. We made a really bad trade, in our dream for all inclusively loving eternity, and we didn't really trade that at all. But that's what it feels like, and that's the psychosis from which everybody is suffering here.
It does seem that way. I couldn't help but notice that at the beginning of that section
Mm-hmm.
on the quiet center in the text, where it talks about in the center of the storm of all the needs, the very beginning caption is "I need do nothing."
Right.
And this is, interestingly enough, this topic came up in a study group the other evening, and it struck me that I had never thought of it this way. But most of the emphasis we place in the world, whether we're course students or not, I think is the do nothing part of that sentence. We think that it all depends on what we're doing or not doing. But the first two words are far more important, I think, and that is that the I that I think I am, when that is in in the driver's seat, and the verb of neediness, of needing, which is obviously a telltale sign of the ego in operation. Those are the clues right there, I think, is when we can catch the little self-interest that you were alluding to, that when we're all afraid, because that's where the self-interest rears its head in so many ways, and then the neediness of thinking, well, there's stuff in the world that has to happen or go right for me, in all these categories, whether it's financial, emotional, the ideas. Sometimes, let's say if you're a creative person, I have to have the right ideas, and I have to have the right tools, and I have to have the right connections in the world. I need all these things. I
Right.
need the right diet. I need the right exercise. I need clothing and shelter and yada yada, and transportation. I mean, the list goes on. It's just endless. But
Right.
and that's the storm that seems like this perennial thing that we can never escape from, which on the level of form, I think is pretty accurate, because the outer shield of oblivion is pretty watertight. But as the Course reminds us, it may be foolproof, but it's not God-proof, and that's where the light seeps through the cracks, and we see that the inner shield can be looked at, which is the shield of the guilt that we think is behind the outer shield, the sin, guilt, fear paradigm that the belief in separation represents. And if we just stop return to that quiet center. However we find we need to get there, we can discover that there really is a place where we can look at all those needs without condemnation, just start to become more amused by them. Whether it's me, popping different kinds of vitamins that I usually take to knock out whatever's in my gastrointestinal tract, or taking more naps than usual, the early part of the week, or all that kind of stuff. Just to look at that and say, okay, I know this is not my reality, but I'm going to allow myself the benefit of that magic, and not condemn myself, and just say it's all fine, and that kind of frees me up to have the same compassion for everyone else, and then
Right.
then we start to unravel that, and then the light does show through the cracks in the inner shield of oblivion, the whole seemingly ironclad grip that the ego has on the idea that we've trashed perfect oneness, and here's all the evidence all around us, but
Right.
no, not so much.
Right. And I think
Diminish it.
that's applicable to, in the example I was using, the way we feel that we need to fix or change or help other people, and we have our ideas about what should happen and what should, and what that should look like, and when in truth, the, yes, the body does need certain things, but that is a clue always of the ego too, that if I'm at all dependent, I mean, there's nothing wrong with suggesting things, or trying to help or whatever, but if you have any investment or need for the other person to comply with your ideas, then obviously you've chosen the ego. And so it's always asking for help, again, that I'm wrong, and help me to see, really, again, the need of every heart is the ego's use of need is that we need something from the world, we need something to help the body, and as you were saying, we can be kind to that, and that's on that level, it's not saying deny the body. We can use that in a right-minded way by being kind to ourselves, and being gentle with ourselves, and recognizing that it's magic, but also recognizing that as long as I believe I'm a body, that can be helpful. But the real underlying need of every heart is to find our way home. We're all trying to awaken from this dream, whether we're on a spiritual, conscious spiritual path or not, and whether we're, even if we are on a spiritual path, the Course is not the only one, and all paths lead to the same place, back to the mind, and to a dissolution of the belief in guilt in the mind, the belief in separation in the mind, ultimately. Mm-hmm. And that's what everybody is desperately trying to find, and will in their own seeming time, in their own dream, eventually find. But that's not up to us how that we don't even understand our own atonement path, as the Course calls it. So how could we understand anyone else's? And so it's always that kind of looking at my own mind and recognizing that right now I have a choice. If I'm feeling something less than peace, it's my mind in need of healing right now, and I really do need to withdraw a little bit at that point, even if it's just it doesn't have to be. I don't have to withdraw myself from the situation, but to pause a moment and take a moment and go back to my teacher in the mind, even if I'm not ready to accept the answer. That is the admission that I must be wrong, and ultimately it will return us to that quiet center, which maybe we could read as a way to conclude the last couple.
Sure. Is there anything from the I Rest in God you want to? I was thinking there's one thing you said that kind of triggered a reminder for me that there's so much in there that.
Yeah, read it, please.
Well, there was one. I'm not going to see if maybe my eyes will land it, but the concept that I was kind of struck with, that is another example of how ego has everything inside out, backwards, upside down, is the idea of rest And I was thinking about that, of course, this week. I was sleeping more than usual to try to knock the symptoms out, right? But I realized that the rest that they're talking about in lesson 190 is the rest of awakening. And
Right.
normally you think of, sleep and rest as sort of somewhat congruent, but in the course, the rest really comes from awakening and being lucidly aware of reality. And maybe it's just metaphoric, but I think there's more to it than that. I think there's really
The holy instant. I mean, along the way, it's the holy instant.
exactly. I think there's a vibrant, lucid awareness that happens that's also very peaceful, but it's also very alive, not in a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense. Frankly, I think that when we have those moments where we really feel our inner kindness teacher, feel the Holy Spirit, taking us by the hand metaphorically and showing us the contents of our mind without condemnation, there is a, a tremendous release and a tremendous ease that happens that is it feels more, you feel more awake, I think, in those moments than the grogginess and the slumber of the ego's, oh, I'm just another victim of, this is just another victimization of me from whatever, kind of thing. But anyway, that was just one thing that crossed my mind among all the usual things that I noticed in here. That one popped out at me.
And that actually is sort of talked about a little in the, let's see, I think if we read the last two paragraphs.
Oh, sure, let's do that.
Passing of I need do nothing.
Okay.
That's where.
Yeah. Do you want to read the second to last one?
Sure.
Okay.
To do anything involves the body. And so again, really, when let me just back up, and the title of that, I need do nothing, it doesn't mean we don't do anything in the world.
Exactly.
It just really means I do nothing without my teacher, I do nothing on my own, because that doesn't ever really work out very well. So I'm in paragraph 7. To do anything involves the body, and if you recognize you need do nothing, you have withdrawn the body's value from your mind. Here is the quick and open door through which you slip past centuries of effort and escape from time. This is the way in which sin loses all attraction right now. So in the holy instant. For here is time denied, and past, where we believe we sinned, and future, which is what we fear, right, as punishment. I printed this out and I can't read the next. What is it?
Gone. Is the last word of the sentence. They're gone.
It's gone. Who needs do nothing has no need for time. To do nothing is to rest and make a place within you where the activity of the body ceases to demand attention. Into this place the Holy Spirit comes and there abides. He will remain when you forget, and the body's activities return to occupy your conscious mind.
That demanding attention, I think that's the ego identity saying, right, there must be something valuable left here in this dream of a separate self. Right. By golly, let's find it. That's the ego's alliances.
And it's all that frantic, like you were sick, and so there's nothing wrong with attending to your sickness. Mm-hmm. But when we become like fearful and frantic and trying to, like, oh my God, I have to do something about this, and what if this doesn't work? And then I better have a backup plan, and maybe I better, that's where we go crazy about it. That's the sign that the ego's involved. I mean, there's a much gentler way to go about attending to the body, right?
Yep, exactly.
Or attending to others, I mean, right, as I was.
Right, and that's usually a clue is when since you point out the attending to others. Usually, if there's an investment in the outcome for another, usually that's some kind of a fear motivation of thinking, well, yeah, I'm either not going to get the appreciation or recognition that I'm hoping for, or it'll somehow be my fault that I didn't contribute enough or wasn't enough. I was actually kind of flashing earlier on and happened to watch the other day Jim Carrey's commentary at the Golden Globes quite a few months ago, maybe more than a year ago, and he was giving this speech where he said, uh, I, I, I'm, when I go to sleep at night, I'm not just I think something like two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey,
Right.
or not just Jim Carrey. I'm two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey, and he says I'm hoping that someday I'm going to dream that I'll be three-time Golden Globe winner, because then maybe I'll be enough,
Yeah.
And I think there's always a not enough that the ego recognizes.
That's right.
Is,
I'm not
is
giving enough. I'm not worth enough. I'm not. Yeah.
yeah, and that's, I mean, the epitome of neediness. Because the ego, if the ego truly is nothing, then how could it be anything but needy? And we've put ourselves in a position where, through putting the binoculars backwards, we're seeing this little microscopic nothing as is being big, sort of like the elephant binocular. I know,
Right.
but we've got it all backwards, and
Right.
so what really is small appears to be large, and what's huge and infinite, oceanic, uh, disappears from our view, and yet. We've just, again, got it all backwards, because we really don't have any needs in truth. But only from that perspective can we look at the seeming neediness that we have, do the things in the world that seem gently appropriate, and then just, gently laugh at the rest,
Right. And all the rest of the trying to make
Yeah.
something out of nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, shall I read the last paragraph there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yet there will always be this place of rest to which you can return, and you will be more aware of this quiet center of the storm than all its raging activity. This quiet center in which you do nothing, maybe the emphasis should be on the word you, little y you, in which you do nothing, will remain with you, giving you the rest in the midst of every busy doing on which you are sent. For from this center you will be directed how to use the body sinlessly. It is this center from which the body is absent that will keep it so in your awareness of it. And I think that when we kind of get in the groove, or in the flow of listening to Holy Spirit and listening to that inner kindness teacher, there are moments, holy instance, when the body is no longer the big deal. And I think that's what we're being encouraged to
Yeah.
attend to more and more in our mind.
That is a big relief, as you were saying earlier, even if it's just a nanosecond that we're not identified with the body, and we feel that tremendous relief.
Yeah.
That there's no guilt. There's no, the heaviness of it all is gone for a second.
Yeah.
And to use the body sinlessly really is using it as a forgiveness classroom. Using it to change, to allow Jesus, Holy Spirit, to transform what I think my relationships are about, and recognize that it's all only about the healing of my mind for all of us. That's really what we want to be doing here.
Exactly.
So
relationships provide a wonderful clue too. I recently saw a documentary about some NSA team members that had developed this technology called ThinWire, I believe it was. And in that, they were sharing how they had actually figured out how to, using not just the data, all the little seemingly separate parts of data that they were collecting on everybody on the planet, conceivably, but the relationships between everything, and how the context was so important. I was thinking, well, that's exactly what the Holy Spirit does, is take the ego's use of things, which is making everything a special relationship, and turning it around. And they had this wonderful map of visualizing how all these things happen. I was reflecting on how LinkedIn had this graphic visualization tool, so you could see all the people that you'd worked with, and how those are all networked together. And anyway, it was interesting to see how, again, Holy Spirit will take anything that is in our minds and use it as a reminder to see our relationships to everything and anything differently, and all about the shared interest, which ultimately, of course, is the shared interest of returning home together from where we never left. And then so that was kind of an interesting aha moment while I was looking at this and seeing, well, gee, no matter what the activity, it's really all about the intent and the motivation, the why, and which teacher have we taken the hand of.
Right. And it's just the question, it's just my willingness in the moment with something that seems to be, when I'm reacting, to be willing to just question that maybe I'm wrong about the cause. And that's the invitation to the Holy Spirit, to Jesus, to my teacher. That's remembering it's a classroom. And that's all, our part is very small, as it also says in chapter 18, our contribution to the truth is really insignificant. We have, but the part of our mind that walks beside us always will lead us there if we're just willing to take that first step. So,
yeah. I since I can look out my window and see the ocean in the distance, I oftentimes think of the metaphor of the ocean and how the self that we think we are, the self that I think I am anyway, is it would be an greatly inflated metaphor to think of myself as a drop in the ocean. And yet everything that we do, choose in our minds, let's rephrase that, is vitally important toward the ultimate undoing of the whole belief in separation, so that we can return our thoughts to the oceanic.
Whatever's troubling us that's the divine purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. We probably should conclude.
Yep. Any final thoughts? Any announcements?
I don't think so. Just maybe the reminder that I have a interview. I just realized on my website called it's with Ken Wapnick, called The Quiet Center.
Right.
So people can take a look at that also.
Right.
That's at foraysinforgiveness.com under Ken Wapnick interviews, and there's a section it's mostly Ken Wapnick interviews that are there.
Yes. I'll post that on the link too. So, yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Susan. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and always insightful and helpful to me as reminders to look at the contents of my mind without condemnation, and practice forgiveness, and
practice, right?
and return to that quiet center. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I really enjoyed it.
Very good. Okay. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Thanks.